Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, sorry, Norman, it's Vicky's time to shine. Again. As we kick off the second in our series on the films A Star is Born.
Yes, a star is born. And in its splendor and deep emotional fire, in its shining beauty and wonderful heart, a new era in motion picture achievement is also born. You'll see it in the richness and magnificence so lavishly poured into every scene. You'll feel it in the countless moments of deep human understanding. You'll hear it in the rousing tempo of its great music. And you'll know it when you experience the joy and jubilation of Judy Garland as the star. And you'll never forget James Mason as Norman Maine, clinging desperately to the only real love he'd ever known. There's Jack Carson, Charles Bickford, all bringing inspired life to a story that only life itself could have inspired.
You don't know what it's like to see somebody you love crumble away in front of your eyes bit by bit, day by day. I hate myself because I failed to.
You got it. Just like you dreamed it.
Oh, no. I've got more. So much more.
How I love you, Swanee. How I love you. Andy, I feel like we need to break this episode up with some massive vaudevillian musical numbers. I think that's a way we could really improve the patter of the show. Don't you think, the patter?
Oh, absolutely. It needs it.
Now, I believe if I am correct, you and I both watched the restored 83 restored version?
Correct.
Reconstructed version?
Yeah. Reconstructed. Yeah. It was restored as best they could, I guess you could say.
All right. You need to, give us a little backstory on what we saw.
So we watched, when this film premiered, we're talking about the 1954 A Star is Born, starring Judy Garland and James Mason, and directed by George Cukor. This film premiered at 182 minutes, so 3 hours and 2 minutes. Warner Brothers decided, oof, this is long. Let's not have that released. It's too much. And, I think what was happening was there was this fear of TV kicking in. There were a lot of issues happening in the 50s that people were worried about. And studios, this was kind of a turn in the studio system, and they were worried about a long movie. And they thought this 3-hour movie would be a little too much. And so the Warner Brothers executives, even though people seemed to love this movie, they were concerned about not having enough showings in any given day. So they made cuts without George Cukor, who he was off scouting locations for his next film. So they cut about a half hour out of the film. It went from 182 minutes to 154 minutes. And there were 2 major musical numbers that were chopped out. There were crucial dramatic scenes cut out. George Cukor, when he finally saw it, said it was a very painful experience. And it was the kind of this odd thing that they decided to do. But you know how studios are sometimes. They go through these panic modes, and they panicked. And so that's what happened. And the critics seemed to still like it, but it was one of those movies that people were like, oh, but the better version's out there. The better version is out there. And it wasn't until 1983 when all of these people who, and it actually started in 1981, a film preservationist, he found all of this footage in the Warner's archives. Well, most of the footage, as people who watch this film will find out. There are a good number of scenes that you watch that it's just stills. You're watching still photos of, I don't know what they were, rehearsals or some other footage.
Like just backlot stuff.
Yeah, just filler footage. There was one shot where I swear it was probably just a candid shot of Judy Garland laying by the pool.
Right.
But they decided we'll just use this because we don't have anything else. I felt really bad for them, but I mean, I appreciated that they went through the lengths, and it took a couple years to get it all put back together, including the 2 musical numbers, Here's What I'm Here For and Lose That Long Face. And all of it came back as a reconstructed version in 1983. And they found most of it. They found 176 minutes. So there are 6 minutes still, I guess, unaccounted for, not counting the stills that they ended up kind of filling in. But at least they had the dialogue still. They had, for those minutes that they had to use the stills for, they still had the audio tracks. So that was helpful. And so,
did you notice there is a sequence too where they actually have sound of the scene and they turn it down and play additional sound over the actual scene?
I don't remember that. Huh. Okay.
Yeah, it's the actors' lips are not lining up with what they say, and you can kind of hear the original scene. Anyhow, we'll might get to that. I'm going to find it. It's disconcerting.
Well, people still are hoping that the remaining 6 minutes will be found, and that they're hoping for what people have now dubbed the long lost George Cukor cut. If they ever find those final minutes, so they can actually kind of cut this thing together the way that it had been originally intended when George Cukor edited it. But as it stands right now, this is what we have: the 176-minute version, which includes some stills putting scenes together.
I think the stills are just one component that makes this a rough watch. I think it's to my eye, its grandest sin is its just length overall. I think the movie is too long. What we get in exchange for that in this case is, I think, a much more balanced character story. We get so much more between, that of the story between Vicky and who she is, what she is, and the story of Norman, what he is, separately as characters. It feels like a much more balanced sort of expose of who they each are, kind of before they come together, as they come together. It doesn't feel like one character is getting more play than another, insofar as the narrative part of the film is. Obviously she gets more play because she is Judy Garland, and this is a musical, and she sings a lot in this movie. But in terms of the overall A Star Is Born narrative arc, I think we get a lot of character stuff in exchange for that 3-hour runtime.
And I really appreciated that because, you're right. In the first one, it feels very much like Esther's story, right?
Yes.
Like the way that the 1937 film plays. We start with her back home in the country or wherever she's from. And we kind of see her make that decision with the help of Granny to go off and follow her dreams and go off to Hollywood. And we kind of follow her, and she's very much the protagonist of the film. And the wonderful character of Norman Maine is very much kind of the I don't want to call him a supporting character, but he's very much kind of the you could almost call him the antagonist in a story like this, because he's the one who their two stories come together, and because of her success, it pushes him into this place that he ends up kind of leading to his suicide. But it's not really an antagonist. It's the wrong word, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's her story.
Yeah.
He's just the one who's affected by her rise. In this film, the story is more balanced. You have, really, it's interesting. This story really starts with Norman Maine, as we kind of get this sense of the people getting ready to do the Night of Stars, this big kind of Hollywood fundraiser sort of soiree, and he shows up and he's drunk, and it's the kind of that same setup, but we haven't met her yet, and she actually comes in as almost like the secondary character. So it was really interesting to see him become almost like the initial focus of the film, which I really liked. And I think that was a good setup for allowing a much more balanced story between Norman's story and Esther's story, as we get to see these two really grow and kind of come together, and then really experience the pain as his life takes that turn into a direction that is still very tragic.
Yeah, and it's weirdly efficient for a movie that's as long-winded as this is. Like, it gets us into the narrative and into the whole sort of the intrigue of the ingenue plucked from the chorus mode very quickly. In this movie, like I really felt like it kicked off with some great energy, and I was excited about that opening musical number, and I thought she was great, and I thought he was terrific, and it was clumsy, and it was sparked by these moments of violence, him breaking the glass, the mirrors, like just kind of, he felt like such an engaging drunk that I was captivated by this opening sequence, and I thought it really set us up well. What we lose here is her extended family, right? We have none of that backstory of the kid with the starry eyes trying to make her way in Hollywood. Here we have a young Vicky who is already essentially a working scale performer.
It's interesting. I didn't miss the backstory. Because I think that by this point it was probably pretty cliche to kind of have that backstory. I actually really liked this change to her backstory, where she was a performer, but she wasn't somebody who was a star yet. She was just this person who did these gigs and was like a gig performer with this band, and they would go around and do these different things, and was not on a path to ever make anything of herself other than just these little gigs. And it was this moment, and that's what I really liked about this, is this single moment where Norman kind of recognizes, he's kind of fascinated by her when she kind of saves him in his drunkenness at this Night of Stars, which I thought was a really great kind of, I guess you could call it the meet cute in this one.
Yeah,
I really liked it a lot. Not to mention the brilliant lipstick on the wall, but I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. But this one allowed for this, I don't know, it allowed for this sense of this person who was there, who was just, I liked it better than the waitress thing. I guess that's what I'm saying, is she was already a performer, but just because you're a performer doesn't mean you're going to be famous. And so I really liked that because it made it into this thing that felt really authentic. She's doing it. She's actually doing it.
Well, in this movie, if anything, is full of performers who are not going to be famous.
Yeah.
We've got so much chorus line. We've got so much. I mean, it really is a showcase of the anonymity of Hollywood, and that it is a unique struggle to become famous.
Right. And that's what I think this one really excelled at was that moment of him and her, and him seeing her perform at that kind of that bluesy club afterward,
right,
where the performers just go and kind of perform. And he's got that great line. He says, "A career is a curious thing. Talent isn't always enough. You need a sense of timing, an eye for seeing the turning point, of recognizing the big chance when it comes along and grabbing it. A career can rest on a trifle, like us sitting here tonight, or it can turn on somebody seeing something in you that nobody else ever saw and saying, 'You're better than that. You're better than you know. Don't settle for the little dream. Go on to the big one.'" And I think that's, I don't know, it really spoke to me, because it was like, how many people have gone out to Hollywood and have found some semblance of that little dream, and they're like, "Oh, well, I'm here. I'll this is great. I'll settle."
To your point, I think we have that sequence, where she has to make the choice. She has to make the choice to go in for the screen test, at the expense of letting down her band and her piano player, and they're about to leave on tour the next morning, and she has to have that conversation with him. "I'm leaving. I'm not going with you." And that is a really important sequence in the sort of gestalt of this kind of story, which is, our heroine here has to make a choice for her future and a choice to take the risk. And if we believe her in her ability to, or in her willingness to take that risk, then we'll sort of hang with her for the rest of the story. And I do believe her in this thing. I think we needed that scene, and it's a scene that we don't have in the original 37 film, right? We don't get to see that because she's not already working in the industry. I think having that sequence where she gets to make the choice makes the rest of the narrative part of this version better.
Yeah, definitely. And allow for even that moment when Norman, he, without realizing it, after kind of promising all this with her, and she makes this decision, he's shipped off over to location shooting, and he's gone for weeks. And she ends up, not able to do this screen test, and she ends up basically a waitress, which is something she said she would never do. I thought that was brilliant. Like, she took that chance and failed. And I was like, that was totally unexpected. I really loved that. And I mean, it's not like it lingers on it or anything. And even when Norman shows up, it's not like she's bitter, which I thought was a little funny, that she's just like,
we needed
hey!
some of that, right? Come on.
I mean, granted, we were looking at it through photos, so it's a little hard to say, but still, but I appreciated that. And for me, I thought this had a really strong setup. Like, I loved all of the stuff leading up to this moment.
Yeah, and I think now is as good a time as any to bring up the sort of cultural resonance of that relationship. And as a woman in the 50s who is in so many ways at this point professionally subservient to this guy, like, she has no control over this. All she can do is remain charming in order to keep him interested in her, right? I mean, that's, if she wants to continue to develop professionally at this time, that feels like an authentic way to respond. And so, I find that choice generally believable, to just to have her be happy. And we're not going to see a movie made in 1954 that's going to treat that maybe with the gravitas that we do with 2018 eyes. 19. God, it's 2019, Andy.
Right. Well, 2018 eyes, though, if you're looking at the most recent version. So I think that's an acceptable way to say it.
All right. Andy with the save. Okay. So I like it. Can I I want to divert just a little bit here and talk more specifically about Judy Garland.
Okay.
Because we're counting on Judy Garland, the actor, to be able to deliver all of these little nuances and do it in a way that's in a film that is kind of multiple personalitied. And I did not find her believable in a consistent manner throughout the course of the film. I struggled with her performance more than anything else. Am I alone?
Interesting. No, I mean, yes.
Curses. I really did. I struggled with her. I found her just in some cases just straight up not believable. I found her. I found the singing. There was just too much singing. I got really tired of her voice, and I felt like the musical numbers over and over again really distracted from the story, especially in the last hour, that I wanted just to sit with, and I wanted to let James Mason kind of own the end. And in those set pieces, it can be such a star piece for her that it's really exhausting until we get to kind of the last 45 minutes. And our entry into the last 45 minutes is this incredible sequence where she does this bit about being happy, bringing the happy to the farm or the neighborhood or whatever. And then she goes in and she has this conversation with the producer, and we watch Judy Garland really straight up perform and delivers this amazing scene where she talks about how she hates herself and she hates him and she hates their relationship, and that she feels like she's failed him. And I am back in it for the end of the film. And when she has to turn around, this like Cukor magic, right? When she has to finish that scene where she's in tears and come back around and play the freckled optimist as they lean in on the close-ups of this particular musical number, I thought was incredible. So I find the film a real roller coaster in whether or not I'm with Judy Garland. When I'm with her, I'm really with her. And when I'm not, I want to watch this movie on about double speed with no sound through the middle hour and 20 minutes.
So, okay, I've got 2 points there. I don't disagree with you at the film's length and the musical numbers, because for me, it's too long, and that's largely where it bogs down for me is the songs. Because for me, and this is, I think, my sense of how I enjoy musicals, is I enjoy a song that it's kind of almost like built in as a part of the story, and as the song goes, it's helping tell the story and move us somewhere.
Yeah, it moves the story forward.
The songs here all feel like and it's weirdly part of the nature of the film, because she's filming musicals. So sometimes I feel like we're just watching songs that are parts of these various musicals that she's doing, and she's performing like, down in Brazil, and here's what they do, and now we're in Africa, and there's a tiger in the living room, and all this stuff that she's doing. It feels very much like, okay, we're just watching scenes from musicals. Now I get it. There's a thematic subtext to the song and how it fits into the story. But for me, it just was still too much. Like it really took its time giving us all of that. And for me, it really slowed it down. So I do agree with you to that point. I think that is very much the case here. But as my second point, I have a hard time completely faulting Judy Garland, because I think she gives an incredible performance throughout this film. I really enjoy her character. I enjoy the way that she builds this relationship with Norman, and the way that she kind of gets to this place at the end where he's destroyed and she's watching him, and when she sees him and she does her plea in the courtroom and everything, it all worked really well for me. I just liked all of the way that she performed all the way up through to the end. I just feel that struggle for me is because of the songs.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. And case in point, the musical montage right in the middle. It's the very last thing before the intermission in this film. It starts at about an hour 8 and it lasts an hour 23. And this is where Vicky and Norman are going to see her first big premiere. And this musical montage is them watching the sequence in the movie, right? And what it's describing is, check me when I start lying, it's the character in the movie and her sort of coming of age as a performer. And so we go through her performing history as she's auditioning, as she's trying to get jobs modeling, as she's trying to make a name for herself. This sequence, the backstory of a character in the film that otherwise, if you think too hard about it, you don't really need to care about at all, is 15 straight minutes of playing sort of musical Frogger, right? A few bars, it changes songs and changes tones, and I find it super frenetic to listen to and concentrate on, especially when you think about, like, I don't know how this is not set up as some sort of a biopic of Vicky. She's playing a character in this thing. Do they want us reliably to see this as her musical montage, the performer, or is this just, as you say, another musical moment to give Judy Garland a chance to perform?
Well, and I can see why you're picking that one because it's such a long song. But I do think that fits in with musicals from the 50s. They would have these song medleys. Yeah. Like even Singing in the Rain has that Broadway melody medley that kicks in toward the end. And those are musical bits in films that I always struggle with. You know, they go, it's almost like this blend of these songs. And I don't know, inevitably I have a hard time with them. I much prefer other sorts of songs where they're singing part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, it is an odd scene because it I don't know. I found it actually pretty interesting personally, that they set it up almost like we're watching Esther's backstory, even though it's not Esther's backstory. Or is it? Like, it was a weird thing to kind of throw in and allow us to linger on for such a length of time. Almost like assuming like, okay, we didn't give you the backstory early, so this is it, even though it's now in this fictionalized setting. It was really weird.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know why they chose to do it that way. I did kind of like it, but again, it's one of these things that it's like, did we need a 15-minute musical number in the middle of the film? I don't know. What's interesting about that song, just to sidestep the point that we're talking about here, that song was actually at her husband's suggestion, doing this whole medley as this showcase for Judy. And and Warner Brothers inserted it, even though George Cukor didn't actually want this. This is funny. He actually feared adding this would lead to cuts in other areas. And look at what happened.
Oops.
Yeah, so funny.
What is interesting about it, as we look at parallels between all of these Star is Born movies, the thing that this gives Judy Garland, the sort of vaudeville performer, a chance to do is to jump around and change sort of characters and character voices very, very quickly. And she moves from scene to scene, which I have to add, like, watching this 15 minutes outside of the movie, just like queuing it up at an hour 8 and watching that sequence without the benefit of everything on either side, it's visually really cool, right? The production design is super cool. The way they move through all of these different musical numbers and sets, I think, is really interesting, and these beautiful costume changes and things. It's actually quite lovely to watch if you don't pay attention to the rest of what it's doing to the movie as a whole. But it also gives Vicky a chance here. Vicky, and we're using Vicky and Esther interchangeably. It's the same, for those who don't remember, it's stage name. So you got it. It gives Vicky Esther a chance to do that thing where she's jumping around from scene to scene and showcasing all of her range, right? It's showcasing her, singing in different styles and different tones and her ability ability to move and dance in different ways. And it just reminded me sort of spiritually as the kind of meet cute sequence we talked about, where she was playing the waitress at the party in 1937, where she's jumping around from group to group and she's kind of playing a different part, which I thought was equally cute. Also there to demonstrate her range as a performer and hopefully get noticed. And in this case, she wanted to get noticed to try to stay a budding star, right? This was her big shot. She needed people to fall in love with her and to see her range and want to see her again. And I thought that was interesting in service of the story.
Well, yeah, and I think that is largely going to hold true for me for any of these types of musical numbers in these movies where it's a musical number, but it doesn't fit so perfectly with the story. Like, I think that it's an interesting story. It's an interesting and beautiful thing to watch in and of itself.
Exactly.
But yes, when I'm watching a 3-hour movie, cut that 15 minutes out.
Yeah, cut it. And you brought up the other musical number, which was in that last sequence or in the last part of the film, which was her coming home after a long day to Norman, and she then puts on the practice record and proceeds to dance around the apartment doing all kinds of different, songs and accents and, with the leopard rug and dancing around, like doing with
the lampshade on her head.
Lampshade on her head. And I know that I've got this sort of gift of hindsight here, but I just didn't like the song. I didn't like what they had her doing. I was embarrassed for her, Judy Garland, in this movie. I was so taken out of the movie in that sequence. I thought, why did she say yes to this? This is ridiculous. And to have James Mason in the background with that giant smile clapping for her after that nonsense that she had just done on screen, I found myself, I was really surprised.
I don't think I reacted to it as negatively as you did. I mean, it was fine, other than obviously
it's still a 50s musical number that jumps all over the place.
That, right. And there are elements that you have to take into account that nowadays probably wouldn't play so well.
Right.
As far as like, racial depictions and things like that. But there was something about the place of it that I thought was interesting. And to that end, I kind of enjoyed it because there was this element of the way that Vicky here was trying to, she saw that Norman was going through some depression here, right? She saw the golf clubs or the golf balls on the floor, and she knew, from a line earlier in the film, he said something about how he would play golf when he was depressed or whatever.
Right.
And so she saw that he had made the sandwiches and all this sort of stuff. So it's almost like this moment where she's like, let me see if I can, put on the show and use it to kind of, get him out of his funk. Mm-hmm. And so to that end, I appreciated it, but I didn't have the issues you did, but I still didn't walk away loving the scene.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I agree with you absolutely. The scene, it needed something. It needed her to put on the clown makeup and make him smile, right?
Yeah.
I just didn't like what they chose to do with it.
Yeah.
Which I think is two separate things. Yeah. What about their relationship in general, right? Of Vicky and Norman. Did you buy it, especially in comparison with Vicky and Norman of the first one?
Yeah, and that's something I think that in these two films, they've done a really good job of developing these relationships in both cases between Esther and Norman, and allowing us to kind of see this relationship form and seeing this kind of connection between these two people, and the joy in her and kind of the pain in his life as he's kind of crumbling. I really liked James Mason in this. I've always enjoyed James Mason. I think he's a fantastic actor, always exciting to watch. But I think the two of them had a great on-screen chemistry, and that's something you don't always get. But I enjoyed every scene that the two of these people were in together. From the moment when they met and she kind of helped him drunkenly on stage, to afterward when he sees her and they're talking after kind of singing that song, to the moment when he proposes, which was just kind of this really awkwardly adorable proposal that they do in front of everybody. I don't know. I liked their relationship all the way to the painful moments at the end. I mean, it worked really well for me.
I actually agree with you, and I was set up to not like it. When I sat down, I was watching this with my daughter, and she is a teenager, and the first thing she said when she saw them on screen together kissing was, "Oh God, that's horrible." And I stopped and thought, wait a minute, is it horrible? Am I just totally checked out on this? Is this an inappropriate thing? And I totally get it from her perspective, but for me, I actually really bought it from, it turns out from the beginning, I bought it. And I think it's because in this movie, she plays a little bit older than Vicky in the first movie, because we didn't have the scene where she's leaving home. She presents here, Garland presents a grander experience, and that she has more agency in that transition from, not knowing Norman at all to being his wife.
Also, and maybe it's because, I mean, has your daughter seen Judy Garland in any films other than The Wizard of Oz?
Nope.
Because
that's an astute thing to point out, Andy. That's right. She was a kid.
Right. And I think, I mean, Judy Garland, even at this point in her career, amazingly still looks like, she has that just youthful vibe that comes across really well. And so you see her in this, and even though at this point she was born in what, 1922. So this was 54. So they're 52. So she's 32 when she was making this. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, and she's. I think shortly after finishing this, she has her third child. So she's very much an adult, but she looks still very much like a young person. And so I can see if a young person has only seen her in The Wizard of Oz and then sees her,
that's going to be context shock.
This old James Mason is like, what the heck? Yeah, because James Mason, now I'm really curious. James Mason was born in 1909.
So he was 102
he was 40
when he did this movie.
1909.
I get it now.
Yeah, so he was 45?
Yeah, right.
44, 45, somewhere in there. And so, yeah, I mean,
when you're 16, that's gross.
Yeah. Just kind of continuing the relationship angle, and specifically like the Judy Garland angle with this film, I do think that it's really interesting, especially the way that they ended up writing this version of the script, where it really did have a much stronger balance between the Norman Maine character and the Vicky Lester character. This film, and we talked about this a little bit last week, how it had been kind of lost, and Warner Brothers ended up acquiring the rights in the I think it was around 1952 or so, and how it kind of came to be. What I think is interesting about this is that Judy, it was I can't remember exactly how it was, but basically she went through this pretty awful stretch, right? She was a contract player for MGM for a very long time. And but as we talked about when we talked about The Wizard of Oz, she really sadly was abused by this studio system and became an addict and became a real problem person to work with in the films. And so even though she was working with MGM all the way up into the through the 40s, and I think into 1950, she they were having issues with her. She was became very difficult to handle. Weight issues, argumentative, drug issues, all sorts of things. She tried to kill herself. I mean, there are just all sorts of awful things. And it was just a really rough time for her. So in 1950, MGM kind of severed their contract, and they parted company. And so she went on this journey to try to kind of get herself going again. And so she did a lot of stage performances and really kind of cleaned up her act and everything, even though she was still struggling, but she cleaned up her act largely. And actually her stage shows became really quite popular. And that's how she kind of regained this fame again. And she had gotten divorced with Vincente Minnelli that she had met when she did Meet Me in St. Louis. And she ended up meeting Sidney Luft in 1952. They got married, and he became her tour manager and producer. And they had a baby, which was, I think, her second and their first together. And then that's when they decided, he was this tour manager producer guy. He kind of saw her with an opportunity to say, hey, maybe we can turn this into something. And that's when this property kind of got back into Warner Brothers' hands. Judy with her husband and I think there was one other person, but they formed this production company, Transcona Enterprises, and they came to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers saw this huge success that she was having on stage and thought, hey, maybe it's worth it, and let's give it a try. So that's how this whole thing came to be. So it's so interesting to me that this story ended up being really so balanced between the two because of the way that it was kind of crafted as this vehicle to kind of remake Judy Garland, so to speak. It wasn't just about her, and I really appreciate that they actually. And maybe it's because George Cukor was attached. I don't know, but somehow it really felt so much bigger than just a Judy Garland vehicle to me.
What I read is that she was still notoriously unstable off screen, and that Cukor was dealing with her with all of the things that you just described related to her trying to get and stay clean, that she was dealing with with weight fluctuations for continuity with the character. Did you notice any of that on screen? Did it present anywhere for you?
And I don't think it started that way. I think she started off fine. The way that I read it is as things progressed through the course of production, issues started. She started having pleas of saying she was sick and all of these sorts of things and all these issues that happened at MGM. But it started okay. I just think it was a case of her being pushed into these situations, and sadly, I think I think the system had already kind of done its damage on her. And I think anytime she kind of kept getting into these projects, it just it was hard for her to not end up having these same issues again,
She's definitely a talent for the ages. And I know I'm an island that I don't have that kind of Garland fandom that so many people do. Like, to me, I'm not a huge fan, but again, the last of this movie, when she sits down and really performs, I would trade any of those little sequences, the courthouse sequence, the sequence where she says, Norman's in a sanitarium, those sequences, I would trade any of those musical numbers for more of those sequences with Judy Garland just straight up acting.
Well, and that is the frustrating thing when you're doing this vehicle. And I get it. I mean, she was a singer. I mean, that was largely what she was known for as a star through her whole career, was that she was this great performer and singer. And so they want to have her sing. But it just, I think both of us, and for both of our case, I think we're both frustrated that, and I think the other issue is, I didn't think any of these songs were that special. Like none of these songs were like, anything from The Wizard of Oz, or even like, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas from Meet Me in St. Louis, or Get Happy from whatever it was from. I'm blanking right now. But she has so many other songs. And I know that the one song in this one that was nominated for an Oscar, The Man That Got Away, which she sings, that kind of that very bluesy song. I liked it. It was a nice song. It didn't stick with me. And I think that was kind of what I was hoping for with this as a 3-hour musical. I was hoping I'd walk away going, oh, those songs are songs I'm going to be singing for a while.
I got none of that.
I don't want to say that it's not going to work for other people. I mean, that's one thing with musicals that I've always found. And sometimes these songs just really stick with certain people and not other people. And that's fine. I mean, I think other people will probably find a lot of joy in listening to these songs over and over.
Right. Again, as a representation of the time, maybe it is possible that we are dated out of some of this entertainment content.
Yeah, right.
Already mentioned James Mason. Man, Cukor wanted Cary Grant. Cary Grant did not want Cukor, and I think we're better for it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Cary Grant, I would have been an interesting choice. I've seen him play drunk before. I think he would have been fine, but Yeah. I mean, once you see James Mason in this part, it's like, no.
Nope.
James Mason
That's
owns
right.
this role.
That's right. He really does.
So good.
It's just terrific, and a delight to see him. Some of the great sequences, James Mason, just quintessential James Mason sequences, when he sets up Oliver to hear her singing through the open window. It's fantastic, and it's so fantastic because, frankly, I didn't get that it was a bit until late in the bit, and it was really rewarding that he was so subtle and so good at playing his boss that when I realized it was a bit, it was a wash of just reward. I thought, this is great. This is exactly what I want to see in this movie. More of this, please.
Well, if anything, in that scene, I was like, boy, he's not good at poker. Because he's way too excited.
Right. It was so good. It was so good. So Matt Libby is played by Jack Carson, as the PR guy.
Do you think Libby feels any remorse in either of these films when he sees that Norman Maine has killed himself? That potentially he's the one who led to that suicide?
I didn't think about that until this movie. That is an apt parallel. Both of these guys should be completely bereft. It's on them.
Totally is. What a
he started
jerk.
Drinking. He's such a jerk. The jerk's Libby. It was not good. I do think. I think in this one, in the 37 version, I really liked it. I never got a feeling that Libby in 37 liked Norman. Not once.
No, never.
Never. It was always a relationship of professional relationship. And in this movie, I felt a little bit more betrayed because for the entire kind of first half, I really felt like Libby, that was going to be a difference, that Libby actually liked him. So it was then a shock when they had the bar sequence at the track, and Libby, told him, it's the same thing he said in 37 was, I don't like you. I've always been doing this for the job, and it leads to the fight. And I felt like that was out of sorts for me. It was that came a little bit out of left field. I thought that might have been something that they do a different way.
Well, but is it out of left field, or did it work because of that? Because it seemed like he was a nicer guy, but then it turned out, no, I was only doing it because it was my job.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
that's a
to
good
me,
point.
I think that makes a stronger betrayal.
Yeah, you wanted the betrayal, and I guess I wanted the consistency. As long as we're watching these movies in of a piece,
it just allows for this great moment where it's that that heartbreaking moment for him, where he realizes this guy who he always thought was in his corner really isn't.
Yeah, right. No, that's
and never
point.
Was. It was only in the studio's
never
corner.
Was. Right. It's like it's any time you see an attorney in a movie who is telling you he's on your side, he's always on the client's side, and that's the thing that we have to get with these PR guys. Like, we're setting up the gestalt of PR.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, that's fair.
Yeah. So between the two of them, I would argue that this one was actually written better because it felt a little. It allowed for in my situation, it allowed for a stronger betrayal. So I liked this Libby better.
Well, I get it. I would just say that if that's the case, then I don't think Jack Carson played him clearly enough. I never got a sense that Matt was ever frustrated, right? Like,
well, yeah, right.
And I feel like
agree,
that needs to be telegraphed a little bit, because then it's a betrayal that the audience isn't, like, is so not expecting that it's a betrayal to them too. Right. I mean, I totally see your point. I really like the fact that there is drama in the knife in the back. But I feel like the way Jack played it, we weren't in on it quite enough. It's okay for it to be a betrayal for Norman, but I don't think it's always 100% okay to be a betrayal without having any hint.
Yes, I agree. But I don't think that's Jack Carson's fault. I would pin that on Moss Hart, who wrote the screenplay.
Yeah.
I don't think that those scenes were in here at all.
Now, you don't think he could have peppered his lines with a few more discreet eye rolls, maybe a tongue wag? Okay. All right. I'm all for the discreet eye rolls.
But I did like this Oliver Niles, though. Charles Bickford played Niles.
Very much.
I feel like I've liked both of our Nileses. I think that is a character that's always worked, but this one I think had some great scenes, like when he lets Norman go. I thought that was actually really nicely done, the way that he doesn't want to do it and he kind of is hiding out almost, and
Yeah.
it was played really nicely. I liked it quite a bit.
I did too. It was a scene between two gentlemen, and I appreciated that, right? There was no fighting or door slamming or glasses thrown in the fireplace. Like it was two gentlemen talking about, their future. And I think so much of that is because Norman at this point is already, he's already sort of given up, right? He knows where this train is going.
Yeah.
And so it was easier for him to be a gentleman about it. He does, he has a little bit of that, of the fallback again, where he slips, and starts lying a little bit about how all the studios are getting him once we have that sequence in the sanatorium.
Right.
But nevertheless, I think that turn in the study was quite nice. Danny, the piano player here, played by Tommy Noonan.
What I liked about this was the fact that Danny was basically the granny character, right?
Yep.
He's a character who allowed for that other person for her to talk to and to bounce these things off of. That wasn't necessarily a person back home, and that I think was an issue we both had with Granny in the last film. Is that Granny was hardly ever there. She's there at the beginning and she's there at the end, and largely is dumped through the bulk of the film. Here we have Danny kind of consistently through the film, always there by her side, and that he allowed for this moment at the end when he has this conversation with her. It was that wall that she needed, that to kind of have these ideas kind of bouncing off of, and he was this kind of a sounding board. I don't even know if that's the right way to describe it, because he's really the one who kind of comes to her and tells her these things. But it made so much more sense coming from a person who was there witnessing it this whole time, not this Deus Ex Machina character who kind of comes in at the last moment to say, to spout these things. I really liked this character.
And Tommy Noonan plays him so well. Like, I find him just affable, likable, lovable, cheek pinchable kind of kind. And and that it ties her back to her, her old life, but an old life that is still relevant to the story that we're talking about now, not an old life on the farm.
Right. Yeah.
So
exactly.
So okay, so that's the parallel cast that we're most interested in. What do you think about the other? There are a few other sequences of note that are parallel sequences between 37 and 54. What stands out to you?
Well, I think we're going to start noticing the things that kind of hit, and I think we've had that conversation where he's witnessed that something special. And wants to kind of see her do more. I think that moment is really nice when and I read that little speech that he had earlier when he kind of talks to her after hearing her singing in that blues club. It's a great moment that we kind of have running between these films when he sees that spark basically, and then recognizes her as somebody who has something. I think that's a great thing that we're getting through this. Plus, I mean, I am just absolutely in love with this whole line that they have of where they in both films so far, where they call them back and say, "Oh, hey," and she turns and says, "I just wanted to look at you again."
Yes,
I love that.
Yes, absolutely,
and it works so well, and James
touching.
Mason plays it wonderfully.
It's at a good place in the film too. I mean, it's just great.
Other than that, I mean, I there's a lot of consistency in just the overall stories and stuff that we see. I'm trying to think if there's another moment that stands out as like, oh, that's absolutely a key moment.
Well, what about the funeral?
Yeah.
The funeral it's aggressive and it's albeit brief. I feel like they leveled up the funeral here when we have that scream from the press, "Give us just one look," and the hand reaches in and lifts the veil, and Vicky breaks down, and I thought that was a very strong and a much more aggressive even statement on paparazzi, on media, and media's the nature of media through grief here.
Not even the media, like fandom, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of those people in the crowd are just fans who are screaming and saying these things.
That's
And it's just,
interesting.
it's horrifying the way that people act with these people
Yeah.
that, feeling like, we own them and, perform monkey, dance, monkey
Yeah.
dance.
Right.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
part of the job. Part of the job.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything else that stands out as like other key moments. Oh, actually, another great one is obviously the award speech when she wins her Oscar and he comes in drunk and he gives his little he interrupts her and he has his little kind of speech that he does up there. That was really heartbreaking in this when he's just up there and
Yeah.
like, I need a job, and it's just like, oh my God, this is awful. This is so embarrassing. I'm just horrified for this poor guy and for her for having to be there with him. I felt like it's another great scene that they've continued from film to film, and it's boy, is it a tough one. They I think also they amped it up here just like some of the other scenes.
I absolutely. That's what I was going to say too. It's a level up, and they kept the smack, and her response is excellent. I just really, I mean, that's one of those examples of this heartbreaking scene that that acts as just another dot in between musical performances. George, do you want to talk about George Cukor at all?
I don't have a lot to say specifically about old George. What's interesting is I think that this was the first time for him that he had done a musical, and and also Technicolor and in anamorphic widescreen. So I think for him it was a number of big steps forward in his own career, and I think I don't know. He's a director we've talked about on the show before. He's pretty interesting. I guess he actually had worked with. Which we probably also talked about way back in the Wizard of Oz when he was on it for like a week before he got fired.
Right.
And I think that actually, and I'm going to forget what it is, but there was a nod to that moment when he was on there. It's something he said to Judy. Oh, I think it was they were putting this wig on Judy Garland to make her a different hair color. And one of the things that he did on that week that he was on is he like took the wig off and said, no, let's go with your natural hair. It looks much better. And I think that was a little nod that they put into this when the studio people like make her up to look like this totally different person. And Norm is just like, oh, no. And he just kind of pulls all that off. So I thought that was a nice little nod and a way to kind of connect his relationship with Judy.
It's a little Cukor Easter egg right there.
It really kind
Easter
of is.
Egg. Yeah,
very much. Yeah.
Sam Levitt is the man behind the camera.
There were a few bits that I noticed that I'm like, I kind of like the way they're shooting this. It did have that nice Technicolor look, as we just said. The anamorphic. It's always frustrating watching anamorphic nowadays because I could tell the very edges of frame as things would move off the frame, they kind of squeezed a little bit more, like it wasn't perfectly reframed yet.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in that final George Cukor edit, if they ever find all the pieces, they'll get all that right. But it still looked great. There were a few things that I noticed the way that they lit it, but I think for the most part, a lot of it was it felt pretty standard as far as just kind of the Technicolor musicals. A lot of vibrant songs and dance and costumes and all that sort of stuff. So it stood out in a way where I'm like, okay, they're making this look really nice. It looks like a beautiful 50s Technicolor film, but it didn't. It wasn't like the top of my list or anything. But still, I thought it looked nice.
What do you make of the CinemaScope change? My understanding is after the word that I've seen used is considerable footage had already been shot, they decided to change everything and reshoot in CinemaScope. Is that just a timely decision, or is there something more to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of that falls to this whole switch with the studios dealing with television, the advent of TV, and trying to find things that they can do to get people back to theaters. There has to be this something different. It is going to look bigger and grander, and you can't just get this on TV. So I think largely that's why these sorts of decisions were getting made around this point in time.
Okay, we've already danced a little bit around the music. Ray Heindorf is listed as uncredited behind the music.
Remember, this is a period where, I mean, credits were really short. They didn't feel the need to list everybody. They kind of listed a few key people, and then that was pretty much it.
How do you feel like the guy behind the music in a musical is not worth crediting?
Well, it's a musical, yeah, but it's like he did the score. He wasn't involved in any of the songs. And so to that end, I think that's where that difference happened. You know, he came on board to do all the kind of just the dramatic scoring of the film, and all of the songs were done by, you know, a huge variety of people. I mean, there were Arlen and Gershwin songs in there. There were, you know, Edens and Roger Edens and Leonard Gersh did the Born in a Trunk bit. More George Gershwin, Hart and Rogers, just a wide variety of artists. Mostly it was Arlen and Gershwin, though, Harold Arlen and Ira Gershwin doing the songs. And so they're the ones who I think largely get the notice when it comes time to saying, you know, hey, it's a musical, because you're listening to Judy Garland sing these songs. They're the ones who wrote the songs.
Right. Are these the least memorable Gershwin songs you've heard?
I'd have to look at a list to see.
A list of other songs you can't remember.
Right, exactly. Honestly, I don't know. I know that these guys had done quite a bit of stuff before, and I think Garland actually wanted these guys to come on and do these songs because of work that they had done in the past, if I remember correctly. And so, you know, I mean, I liked the songs. I thought they all worked great in context of the songs themselves and her singing them. I mean, she was just fantastic. But, you know, but now as I read through the names of the songs, like I can't sing any of them. I you know, that to me is the frustrating part. But I mean, you know, I think that there, you know, I think that there are good songs here. It's just nothing that, you know, stands out, or nothing that has lasted the test of time for me.
How'd it do in award season?
You know, it did pretty well for itself, proving that this story is a story that does draw awards notice. It had 5 wins, 11 other nominations. At the Oscars, they were all nominations, no wins at the Oscars. It had 6 nominations. James Mason was nominated for Best Actor. He lost to Marlon Brando for On the Waterfront. That's a hard one to argue.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive performance there. Judy Garland was nominated. She lost to Grace Kelly for The Country Girl. I can't speak to that because I have not seen The Country Girl, but I thought Judy Garland was great. What was interesting, though, is Garland actually couldn't be there because she was actually birthing her 3rd child, her son Joey, and she didn't win, but she always said that Joey was the best Academy Award she ever received that night. So that's very nice.
Very sweet.
But this was that era where it was a little awkward because the station had a camera in her hospital room in case she won, so they could cut to her accepting her award from her hospital bed. Ah, the good old days. I don't know what to say about that.
Well, now it would just be live streamed on YouTube.
Yeah, right.
Now all of that has just gotten easier. Isn't that gross?
Right. You don't have to have the camera there. The person will just tweet it out.
They'll tweet it themselves.
Let's see. Art direction, set decoration, color was nominated but lost to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Costume design, color lost to Gate of Hell, a Japanese film. The original song, The Man That Got Away, we were just talking about, it lost to the song 3 Coins in the Fountain. Now, I will say, the only reason I know about that song is because of Trains, Planes, and Automobiles.
3 coins in a fountain.
Come on, you know this song, right?
right.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones. Oh, yes.
I was going to say that same thing, Andy. This was meant to be.
It's kismet.
No idea what The Man That Got Away sounds like right now, though.
No, but I actually really liked it.
I just watched the movie.
But I did like that song quite a bit. And I was like, you know, okay, I can see why. I guess that song became another of her standards that she would sing often. Like after this, when she would do her stage shows, this became another song that was in kind of that Judy Garland library when she would just go out and sing it, just like, Over the Rainbow, which I think was probably the most famous version or most famous song that she would kind of always sing.
Right.
We just mentioned Ray Heindorf. He was nominated for best score, but he lost to Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, another musical. And then at the Golden Globes, though, James Mason and Judy Garland did get nominated for Best Actor and Actress, respectively, and they both did win. So at least they did walk away with those awards.
How did it do at the box office?
This iteration of A Star is Born cost a pretty penny to get made. $5 million, or $44.7 million in today's dollars. Quite a lot of money. It did have its release on September 29th, 1954. Unfortunately, whether because it was cut down by a half hour or just because audiences didn't click with it, hard to say, the movie, while dubbed a critical and commercial success, only ended up bringing $4.4 million back, or about $39.4 million in today's dollars. The movie ended up with an adjusted loss per finished minute of $34.9 thousand, but it is a film that lingers on in people's memories, and with the restoration and everything, certainly has found a place in people's hearts.
Did it find a place in your heart, Andy? That is the grand question.
Right.
And it is the question that we hope to answer with Flickchart.
All righty, here we go.
Head over to flickchart.com to see how this movie stacks up on our list. If you want to swipe over in the show notes and hit the word Flickchart right there in the links, that'll take you straight to this movie on their lovely site, where you can add it to your own list and see how it stacks up against ours.
Fitting place to start, Pete. A Star is Born, 1954, or A Star is Born, 1937.
Well, this is sort of where the rubber meets the road, ain't it?
It is. It is.
This is a pretty easy call for me, and it's 1937.
Yeah, 1937 for me as well.
All right.
It's not an easy call, though. These two are really close for me. A Star is Born or La Femme Nikita. I will say A Star is Born.
I will say La Femme Nikita.
All right, here we go.
One, two, three. Rock.
Scissors.
Well, I would crush
Nikita
you. I begin
takes
with
it.
the crushing of you.
A Star is Born or Giant. I'm going to say A Star is Born.
I will say A Star is Born.
A Star is Born or The Girl Who Played with Fire. I will say The Girl Who Played with Fire.
Absolutely.
A Star is Born or My Dinner with Andre. I'm going to say A Star is Born.
I will also say A Star is Born. Sorry, Andre.
A Star is Born or 2001, A Space Odyssey. 2001 for me, please.
I would watch oh man. I would see, the thing is, I'd go straight to sleep to 2001, so it might be a good opportunity for nap. But I also get a nap in this one. I'm going to choose A Star is Born.
All right, here we go.
One, two, three. Paper.
Scissors.
Oh. Andy, this might be your first 2001 win.
It probably is. A Star is Born or Christine. I will say A Star is Born.
Okay, that surprises me, but I'm going to give
Actually, no, I'm going to say Christine, the more I think about it.
Okay, good, because that's where I was going to go, but I felt like...
Oh, look at that. I wishy-washy you both ways.
Yeah, you wishy-washy people. I've never heard that as a verb, so that's a win.
I decided to make it up just now. A Star is Born or Defending Your Life.
Defending Your Life. I'm
going to say A Star is Born.
No. That's incorrect.
That is
Try
what
it
I'm
again.
Say.
Try it again.
Defending
Your Life.
A Star is
Defending Your Life.
All right, here we go.
It's
One.
Defending Your Life. Oh, we're doing this? Okay.
Yeah. One, two, three. Rock.
Scissors. Oh, curses.
Well, that puts A Star is Born at 332 on our chart. 332 out of 396. So it's about a 16%, which is pretty low.
Yeah, pretty low. How'd it do on your personal list?
I liked this film. I did have an issue with the musical numbers and what they did to the overall length of the film. But just like the previous film, and even I would say just like, What Price Hollywood, I think every iteration I really connect with these characters and their journey. And so even with the musical numbers, I would still give this a 3-star and a like. So same place I put the previous one, but I would still rank it just a tiny bit lower.
And I think you're a star too generous on this film. I think the mess that is the entire middle of the film dramatically takes away from even the little bit of, not even the little bit, the narrative joy and the performance joy that I get in the beginning and at the end. And I find it just too distracting. It just does not hold together as an entire film experience for me. I'm giving it a 2 stars straight across.
Wow, pretty low.
Yeah. And that's
is
actually
that,
where
is that a 2-star and a like still, or a 2-star
no,
and
it's
no
not.
like?
I'm not going to go back to this movie. I'm kind of finished with it. It's not something that I'm longing to see again. Maybe if I end up doing sitting down with the kids to do a classic film series of these movies. I can't imagine ever doing that ever. But it'd be for a whole different context. Certainly not for the entertainment of it. And that's exactly where it shows up on my flick chart, my personal flick chart. It's 2 stars and it's at a 39%. It's at 645 out of 1,063. Where at 2 stars for letterboxd.com/the next reel, that feels about right. Even 39% feels a little bit high for me.
Wow.
So that's where it lives.
Interesting.
So that brings us to the end of this particular episode and the end of this the first half of our series. We've done the first 2, the classics. Now we're moving up kind of a long way. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, we're jumping to 1976. We're going to be looking at A Star is Born, directed by Frank Pearson, starring Barbra Streisand and Chris Christopherson.
Now,
it'll be an interesting shift into kind of rock and roll as opposed to people working behind the screen.
Have you watched this one yet?
I have not.
Okay, this ought to be interesting. This
is the one you had seen.
Yes, and I'm eager to hear your opinion of this movie, especially now that we've done now that I know where the first 2 stand for you. That's telling.
Well, I look forward to it.
Oh, this is going to be juicy.
Well, everybody, if you want to hear more of us, but you can't wait until next week's show, check out our other show, The Marvel Movie Minute.
We're talking about the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. We just hit an hour on 2008's Iron Man.
And you can support that show and all of our other shows over on thenextreel.com/Patreon, where you can get access to our exclusive members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
You know who else got away with something grand in this? Was like Warner Brothers, right? Because Amazon took the brunt of of the blame for the reconstruction in 1983. So thanks, Amazon, for standing in the way of the bullet on this one. We have some 1-star reviews that are, I think, representative of all of the 1-star reviews. And so you'll get kind of a tone. You'll get a sense of what we're dealing with here. Would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a 1-star by HNL who says, "A fake! This is not the real movie. After about a half hour, it goes to audio only with production stills. WTF?"
Yeah, I got one. I got one from Deb P who says, "I chose HD, so I don't know if the same thing would happen in SD, but a lot of the scenes became photos with the voice still playing rather than the movie. Just disappointed in the viewing, but the story is still a classic." So I'll take that as an object lesson, because that was October 7th, 2018. That in fact, that had nothing to do with HD or SD. It is, in fact, intentional. So, Deb, if you're listening, consider yourself helped.
I think a lot of people started watching this again after the remake.
Yeah,
I saw a lot of people saying, "Well, I wanted to check out the other versions of it." And
you get a real sense that a lot of people watched it, and as soon as it went to the photos, they stopped watching it. right?
Yeah.
Because there's a sense
They
from a
just
lot of
assumed.
these, they assumed the entire rest of the movie was some sort of bootleg. And I get that these days. I mean, I think that's a real concern. If you don't read the package, if you don't read and we didn't even talk about the opening text on this particular movie, right? That actually does explain what's going on.
Right, exactly. The Warner Brothers, which is great. The studio is basically, apologizing for past mistakes that they themselves did.
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sorry, that was our bad. We're trying to fix it now.
That's
So
right.
the picture's needs a little love, but oh dear.
Well, they'll get there.
They'll get there.
You got to have a little faith. Maybe the 2030 rebuild of this film will take care of it. Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great movies, so many great conversations. But it's a lot of work. Producing this show week after week does require a lot behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We had some great films in Season 8 that started their lives as books or plays, and you can find all of them on our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals.
That's the site where listeners can find links to purchase all the source material behind the adapted films we covered, from Season 1 up through our current season.
For part of Season 8, we had a series celebrating the 50th anniversary of films from 1968.
We talked about 2001 and 2010 for our Odyssey series, both adapted from Arthur C. Clarke's novels. Man, the second one was so much better than the first, right?
Don't you even get me started. Need I bring up Under the Cherry Moon again?
Yes, also so much better.
Wait, no, that's not what I...
Planet of the Apes kicked off its series based on the novel by Pierre Boulet.
We covered Danger Diabolic and The Detective, adapted from novels for our 1968 crime films.
Wait, wasn't that The Detective, the prequel to Die Hard?
They were both written by Roderick Thorpe, and yes, it's the same character in the books.
I can't believe they even asked Sinatra if he'd be in Die Hard. That would have been weird.
Once Upon a Time in America was part of our Leone Once Upon a Time trilogy, adapted from Harry Gray's novel.
And we looked at 1968 Best Picture nominees The Lion in Winter, Rachel, Romeo and Juliet, and Oliver!
We also had an Ingrid Bergman series with adaptations like Spellbound, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Murder on the Orient Express, and Gaslight.
We haven't talked about Gaslight.
Stop gaslighting me!
Dive deeper into these books and more adapted films at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations that we've covered on all the Next Reel family of podcasts, and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.